Welcome to Blaise the Trail podcast, bringing you authentic and vulnerable stories that will inspire you to breathe fire on this world and become your own hero. Here's your host, Blaise Hunter.
Hello, welcome to Blaise the Trail podcast. I'm Blaise Hunter, and I am a fertility expert. No, I don't help people get pregnant. This is a different type of expertise. I actually inspire women to birth confidence, to birth books, their dreams, passions, and goals, as well as help them discover peace amongst infertility. After going through my own sets of traumas and tragedies, dealing with a rare disease, and experiencing 3 miscarriages, I decided to take charge of my life and not let life happen to me, but rather become the hero of my own life. I am not barren. I continually birth my purpose every day. So that's why I've created this show, to demonstrate how even though we all experience setbacks and disappointments, we still have a destiny to birth. We just need to blaze the trail and be expecting. This podcast will inspire you to lean into your hardships and allow them to be the vehicle that transports you into becoming the hero of your life so you can breathe fire on this world. This week's episode is called The Hidden Language of Men. And some points we'll cover are learning the patterns of how men and women communicate with one another, how we can crack the man code, what are some of the biggest challenges in relationships today, and how we can bridge the gap of disconnect. And I have my friend here, Vanessa Lusignan, to speak on this topic. Vanessa is the youngest in the family with 3 older brothers and has worked in a male-dominated industry for 16 years. After multiple failed relationships and constant frustration in her career, she decided to become licensed and certified in understanding men under Alison Armstrong. After an intense year of interviewing men on multiple subjects, her perspective completely shifted, altering the world she was living in. Her passion is to help women understand men and find connection and joy in their relationships versus heartbreak and disconnect. Vanessa has since created an amazing partnership with a man who is her husband, and they are expecting their first child very soon. Her stress levels and frustration in her career dissolved as she was able to understand the behaviors and motivations of the men around her. It has been noticed in the organization as her having excellent communication skills. She has taught me so much about myself and men in my life. Welcome, Vanessa, to the show.
Thank you, Blaise. Very happy to be here.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you on. We met one day back when we were both still early in our personal growth journeys, and it's just been amazing to see you grow as a woman and learn so much about yourself and just communicating with women and men, and you've helped me really lean into that. I also study under Alison Armstrong, and I just learned so much from you. So thank you so much for, blazing the trail in this area and really bring this topic to light.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm completely passionate about it, and I'm really excited to be able to share that passion with more women, because I think it's an area of conversation that we don't really get into enough. There's a lot of women that are struggling with their relationships with men, but they just don't really know what to do. How do I fix this? How do I approach this? So my goal and desire is to be able to let women know that there's a different way, there's another option.
Totally. And I think that men really get a bad rep and get labeled as not so deep or very simple, but really they're so complex and have depth. And I think this topic really shows us how to connect and just understand their language. And that's what you're all about. So yeah, kudos to you. And I just am excited to have this whole conversation with you.
Thanks. I'm excited too.
So we talked a little bit about your bio, but let's dive in a little bit more of your backstory and how you got into researching the behaviors of men.
Absolutely. I think that there's largely going to be 2 reasons why somebody's going to have a change in their life. They are going to be motivated, essentially, and that motivation is either going to come from an emotional hardship or it's going to come from sheer discipline. And in my perspective, it was emotional hardship. I was obviously working in a male-dominated industry and often would come home with a lot of stress after the day. I had multiple relationships around me, partnerships that were failing, And there was finally a time in my early 30s that once the relationship had failed and I was now in the grips of heartbreak and heartache, I finally started to look around and go, okay, wait a second, what's the common denominator? And the common denominator was me. And that's why I was like, okay, well then if this is the case, what is happening and what am I bringing to the table that's adding to this potential problem? That's not adding to the success of me wanting to find a partnership that I can grow and get old with. And that's essentially the trigger. It was just hitting rock bottom and recognizing that I needed to try to understand the process of relationships and interacting with men to see if I could shift what my future was going to look like. And I went all the way back to when I was young. So I had took a lot of self-reflection, and I went back to my formative years of really dissecting the relationships that I had with my brothers and where did I sit in the family hierarchy and what behaviors did I develop and why did I develop them? And then I went from there and I went, okay, what about high school and what about college and what were those relationships like and what did I learn and what behavior patterns did I get involved in that was creating something for me, right? Because we're always acting and interacting for the purpose of getting something. And then when I started to look again at then male-dominated industry, what behaviors had I now brought into that environment? And how were the people reacting or interacting with me based on how I was presenting myself? And when you really start to dissect those nuances of our personalities, it opens up a completely different world of going, okay, that means that something needs to change. I need to view things differently. I need to show up differently. And the most incredible thing is that once you make that conscious choice, then the world around you completely shifts because the world starts to show up differently to you. And that's when I had found Alison Armstrong, one of my good girlfriends, had suggested like, hey, maybe I think that this might be some really good information in here. And at first I was like, oh, okay, you know what? I'm a bit too heartbroken to take this on. So thank you, but I'm not ready. And about 6 months after that, I was like, maybe I should click on this and figure out what this is all about. And by getting into her work, it just finally made sense. Like after all of the relationship books that I had ever read, none of it seemed to make sense in my life. But hearing how she was presenting the topic material and explaining the behaviors of men, it was like, oh man, why didn't somebody explain this to me or teach me this when I was in high school? And what were the possibilities potentially for my life if I would have known that information? So because it was so transformative for me, I wanted to become dedicated to become licensed and certified to be able to help other women in that same mindset.
Oh, that's fantastic. And the pinnacle whole structure of words that you just said was that you were reflective and realized you were the common denominator. And I think so often we want to blame outside sources, other people, other circumstances, instead of, maybe it's not all our fault, but understanding we have a responsibility and we have a part to play in how our life is playing out. And we are the common denominator if we see a pattern that we don't like. And so it's understanding, what part do I play in that? How do I change that? What can I do to improve this, right? That is pinnacle for you and for me. And I think we have the same friend that led us to Alison Armstrong and changed my life of how I viewed men, how I treated men, looking back at relationships. And I just applaud you for doing the work because that's hard. It's hard to look back and really examine that you teach people how to treat you. And you also are part of that role and how people are reacting and projecting back on you, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And it's really hard to own it. And you hit that perfectly as well. A lot of times we get stuck in victim mentality. And when you get stuck into that victim mentality, it's so easy to be supported in that space, especially because if I were to share my heartbreak with my girlfriends, I get supported with attention. I get supported with, that's not fair, and I totally agree with you. But it's not very often you actually have somebody ever say to you, okay, I hear you. I hear that you're in the grips of heartache, but have you ever thought about potentially what you brought to that table? Like, how were you acting? Like, did you all of a sudden completely lose it and then potentially trigger somebody else around you. And that's the kind of the hard part when you get into that space, because yes, it sucks when we're in that pain. Absolutely. And to be supportive in that space is important. But have we ever thought about going, how would you like me to support you? And actually ask that question to the person versus just kind of going into that automatic default mode of just agreeing with everything that they're saying versus like, right now, what do you need from me for the most support? And maybe right now it is just say, you know what, I totally agree with you and that makes total sense. And maybe there's other times where I'm looking at my girlfriends and going, I need you to tell me the truth. Was I acting out, or is this unreasonable, or do I need to spend more time thinking about this? So it was really shifting because I was stuck in that victim mentality for probably, I'd say at least a good 3 years of just thinking that this stuff was happening to me. And as soon as I shifted from that victim space, all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait a second, I need to own this. How did I contribute to everything that's been happening to me?
Yes, exactly. We have to be reflective. That is the key to any change of direction that you want. If you're not happy, what can I do to change it? It's not based on other people changing. We have to do the work and change, and we will see a ripple effect of change once we start doing the work. But like you said, it is work. And I've also studied these teachings, like I said, and I've had patterns over the years, starting young ages, of letting men overpower me because I didn't know my power. I didn't know how to own it, and I didn't know how to, stake a claim on my self-worth. So I let people overpower me and hurt me. And over time, this led me to resenting men and therefore emasculating them, because then I felt the need to take their power away because I didn't have any. And this interesting story about me and my relationship with my husband is that I started learning about Alison Armstrong and, emasculating men and doing all the research on the Queen's Code. That's her book there. And one day I sat down with him and I asked him and I said, do I emasculate you when I talk about your job and the fact that we're stuck in this city, in this place because of your job? Do I emasculate you? And I let silence stick there and I let him answer. And he said yes. And that altered the course of my life. I didn't even know I was doing that. And we had a heart-to-heart, and it broke down barriers and communication walls between us. And right from that moment on, I started changing my language, changing how I spoke to him, and offered him space to show me what he needed to not feel emasculated. And so I really wanted to talk to you about that, of what are some patterns men and women can get into with communicating with one another in relationships, and how do we crack that code, so to speak, to communicate better?
Actually, emasculation is one of the biggest ones. It's uncanny to realize that so many women do that and they don't even realize that they're doing it. And it makes complete sense, though. There's a lot of reasons why emasculation would run rampant in our communication styles, because when you think about it, like you just said, you've had all these experiences happen to you where you felt powerless, and then you decided to take your power back. And emasculation is exactly that. It's a power dynamic. So what you're doing is you're trying to take your power back in the sense of safety. So often for most women, we're in a constant state of trying to feel safe. And if we don't feel safe, we will do what we can to create that safety. So when you're around somebody of the opposite sex, typically we deem them to either be bigger or stronger or essentially bigger than us. And so we will shift our way of being to try to feel more powerful in that experience, because we don't like feeling unsafe. And I think from a communication perspective, that's where a lot of those things will come through, is that we'll find either jabs or we'll make comments that will break down the barriers of the person that we're talking to for the purpose of us feeling safe in our space, essentially. And that's what I think the biggest problem is realistically is communication, is that we haven't been able to adequately learn how to respect and honor somebody else's experience, but also our own, and adequately communicate that with that person. So say, for example, instead of emasculating my partner, I'll go into a space of going, okay, you know what, Renee, I feel unsafe right now, and that lack of safety is causing me to want to lash out. But instead of me lashing out, I need you to understand that to bring my safety back, I need your support in maybe hearing me out or whatever it is that I need. And by being able to adequately break down that experience and communicate it to your partner, it gives your partner the ability to show up. Because as soon as they hear, okay, she's feeling unsafe, for some reason, that's a bit weird. Well, what can I do to help her feel safe in this experience? What if, say, for example, you're traveling out in the world and all of a sudden maybe there's a group of people that has now triggered you that you feel unsafe? Why not communicate that to your partner to give him the ability to provide and protect for you and then move forward from that experience? But take that level of communication and put it in your day-to-day life. Because there's going to be multiple times throughout the day that you might actually feel unsafe. Maybe your husband comes home and he's quiet and makes a very plain comment towards you, and you're thinking, oh, okay, wow, he's not really connected to me. There's something wrong. And, that triggers our lack of safety right there. And so it shifts our behavior and our interaction with them, because now we're trying to get into a space of, well, where do we sit right now? Is there something wrong? Have I done something wrong? Now I'm just upset because I've had a hard day too, and now he's coming home like this, and it can easily escalate. So it's that constant commitment and desire to open up communication and just get real and honest with where we're at.
Oh, that's beautifully said. And I totally agree. And now that I've really worked on this communication and knowing my power so I don't take it away from my partner, I see so many women when you're out and about and how they respond to their partners, or how just these little digs and comments about how they don't make money, or how, they're lazy, or whatever it is. And I often tell them, I'm like, you won't see change if you keep doing that. And then the women's response is, why should I change if they're not changing? So that is, I feel like that's a classic response for women. And what do you say to that? Like, how do you coach women getting out of that mindset?
Yeah, it's exactly what I've heard. And I have a lot of empathy for the fact that women feel that way, that they're wondering, why do I have to do the work? Because in all probability, they're already feeling very overworked. Mm-hmm. When it comes to that scenario of why do I have to change, for me, that is screaming that somebody's needs aren't being met. Yeah. And then that's, from my perspective, I'm going, okay, well, if your needs aren't being met, again, we have to go back to that communication piece of going, you need to start figuring out, what does it look like to start talking about what you need? And even that small step will start to change the dynamic of the relationship without them even realizing that, AKA, they're changing. But why wouldn't we want the person that we love the most to actually know what it is that we need, and to be able to communicate that in a way that provides him the ability to provide it for us? Because most of the time, men don't even know what it is that we need or what they can provide for us, because we don't tell them.
Well, and often we don't even know ourselves, so we're floundering, right?
That too. And actually, that's honestly happened to me so many times, where my husband will ask me, he's like, well, what is it that you need? I'm like, you know what? That's a great question. Yeah. Give me maybe 30 minutes or 40 minutes to sit on it and let me figure that out. And by allowing me to have that time space, I can finally go back into myself and go, okay, what is it that I really need here? Is there something to do with him? Is it something to do with my environment? Is it something to do with a lack of sleep or food? Or in my case right now, I'm pregnant. So there's been a few times where I'm like, I actually don't know what I need. Just, can you cuddle me? And let's see if that helps. It's at least exploring that space. And it's for me, it just unmet needs means that somebody's already overworked, overtired, and they have no desire to change. And they don't also understand that reflection will start to slowly happen, that by us changing how we're acting and interacting will ultimately change our relationship and our reactions in the world. The people around you absolutely will change depending on your demeanor. It's no different than somebody walking into a room and they're upset and they're angry. What do you think happens to everybody else in the room? They get rigid, they get stiff, they get kind of defensive, their eyes open up. That's the world reacting to your energy. But if we can now change and shift into a space that supports being able to communicate what we need and being able to understand somebody else's perspective and stay calm in the face of potential adversity, then you can see that the people around you will do the exact same thing because they're reacting to that energy. One of the coolest things I ended up spending some time playing with is you take two people, sit them side by side, and that one person has to get angry, get loud, get really big, and the person who's sitting opposite them has to stay calm. And what happens is that person who's calm, just by staying calm, will deflate the person who's now showing off that large, big energy of anger and frustration. I was the one who got to play with that, and I was the one trying to be angry and large. And it was crazy to see that after a period of time, like I just didn't have the energy to do it anymore because the person who was interacting with me was so calm that I'm like, I can't actually even fake this. Like I can't do it.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Yeah, like it's really about, the communication angle, about taking time to be conscious in your actions versus reactive. And even learning how to articulate that you're overwhelmed or feeling unsafe or something's happening, because maybe we don't know how to actually say what we need right now. But if we can take that first step of saying, hey, I'm overwhelmed, and instead of lashing out and doing a emasculating dig, just say, hey, I'm not feeling myself right now. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm feeling anxiety, and I don't know how to handle this. It gives your partner or whoever you're interacting with an opportunity to respond in a calmer manner rather than in defensiveness, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Even being able to say, hey, I've been triggered. Like I'm triggered and I just need some space to figure this out. Do you mind giving me an hour and then we can come back and visit it?
Great advice. Time, space, yes. Totally. Oh, this is so amazing. I think we could talk for hours on this topic because I'm passionate about it because, I've seen the light. And I know there's probably women like, yeah, my husband will never change. And I'm like, no, I promise you, like, I know you can attest to your relationships, but like mine too, like my marriage changed that one moment I stopped emasculating, just taking that one step of not doing those digs and being conscious with my words. And our marriage is so in a better place because I'm coming at it with respect rather than trying to take his power away. And I am sure that you've seen that difference too in your own life.
Oh, unbelievably so. And the really special thing for my husband and I is that he met me while I was learning this information. So we both understand the same language, and he has the ability to reciprocate the language to me. So as I'm committed to it, it's incredible to also see him be in different spaces where he now has the tools to adequately communicate to me what he needs. And it's just instant. I'm like, oh, okay, I can provide that. I can do that. I get that.
Exactly. Well, and then it changes too because we're all in different stages of our lives. And you taught a course that I went to on the different stages of men, and it really put into perspective on where my husband was, where my dad was, where all the men in my life were. And I could see how they were reacting. I could see how when I talked to them and communicated, how it imploded because I was coming at it thinking they were in a different stage. So maybe what are those different stages, and help women better connect with their partners knowing what stage they're in?
Yes, there are different stages that men will, essentially from birth to end of life, that you can see them transition through. And they go from, we use kind of like the knight to realm conversation. So we say a page and then a knight and then a prince and then a king and then an elder. And we've chosen that because of the honor and the integrity associated to that timeline, because little men that were pages were so excited to become knights. That was everything that they would dream to be, that they would, at some point in my life, I get to be a knight. And from there, continue to grow and develop into being a king. But when you think about it, all men are looking for that same level of adoration and desire to provide and protect for the people around them. And that's one of the biggest key codes when it comes to anybody who's in a knight or a prince or a king stage. They're looking and wanting to provide for the people around them. And the biggest thing that we need to pay attention to is understanding what does that look like based on that stage. So what are their interests? What are the things that they need to grow and develop in? Where are their interests going to flow? And one of the biggest ones I find women struggle with is the prince stage, because the prince stage is all about building and developing. Mm-hmm. So this is typically going to be the space where You have potentially now a mortgage. You now have potentially a wife. You have kids, and he has to provide for them. And the drive and desire to do that means that a wife might feel that she's being left alone with the kids without a husband because he's working so many long hours. He's working a lot of overtime. He's constantly going after money. But what he's doing is he's trying to maintain a space that he feels comfortable in from financial strains and stresses, but also to provide for the future. So it's not only the here and now of all the bills that he has to pay, but he's also looking towards, retirement. And it's actually been a really interesting kind of moment recently for me as well with my husband and I, because as we're transitioning into now having our first child, he's been saying that I want to work more overtime. And I'm going, okay, this is interesting. Here comes the balance between life decisions of us spending time together before the baby comes. But he's also saying, I really want to work overtime because we can make a lot of money. Like we need the money. And I'm going, well, but we don't need the money. And I'm giggling going, okay, this is the Prince energy coming through because he feels the desire to provide because there's a child on the way. And he's driven to do that. And it's through that understanding of trying to find that balance between, okay, he's compelled to be in that space. How do I support that? And how do I ensure that my needs are still being met? So say, for example, there's 2 days that he wants to work overtime. I'm like, okay, but we don't get much time together before baby comes. So right now we're looking at, okay, you give me one of those days and we'll spend it together. And then you go in for overtime for the other. And it's just in knowing that whatever stage a man is being in, like he's in or potentially triggered into, is being able to adequately approach his interests and his energy in a way that we can be supportive versus potentially going, you know what, you're never home anymore. You wanted this life, you wanted this house, you wanted these children, but I never see you. And it's kind of getting into that defensive state of, why aren't you here? I expected something different. And instead shifting that mentality to go, okay, hold on 1 second. What's happening here and how do I support that? And what does that support potentially provide for me as well? And for you, learning about your dad and understanding what stage he was in totally shifted the way that you were able to interact with him, because I think you also kind of had an expectation of how he was supposed to be acting and interacting in the world. But once you got to hear what was happening in his space, it brought you to a place of going, oh, okay, I can empathize with that. Well, how do I support him to maybe shift into the next stage? What does that look like?
Well, and it was so based on me and what my needs were. And I think we get into that space where it's like, I need this, I want this, but it's like, you won't see the change like that. So I had to shift, and you really helped me with that, because I had done the work with my marriage and that relationship, but it was, the father figure, having this ideal of what he should be and what I needed from him. But I shifted it around and was able to empathize and show mercy and turn it into, what can I do for you, Dad? And it was like a 180 overnight. And I've been open about my struggles with my dad. He had an emotional breakdown. He left us. He faked his own death. He came back and he was hidden in shame. So he was caught in different stages. Even though he was older, he kind of reverted into different younger stages in his life. And, I didn't think we could ever get back to a calm, loving father-daughter relationship. And over the last couple of years, I've just done the work of empathizing and taking me out of the equation and putting the focus on him. And he, in turn, put the focus on me. And that was the beautiful turn of it. And I encourage women, when you're thinking in your head, my husband's different, he won't change, why should I do the work? I'm telling you, you will see the change. You just got to put that step forward and take yourself out of the equation and be about somebody else in that relationship, hey?
Absolutely. And that's why, honestly, the word partnership is essentially kind of what I keep on advocating, instead of relationship, but actually to bring it up to that partnership level, because that means that two people are interacting, but somebody needs to make that first choice to start that interaction.
Yes, partnership. So that was kind of leading into my question, but we've kind of talked about that is the biggest issue in partnerships/relationships, is that the communication level. And what do you say to someone that's like, hey, I need help. we're not communicating. I'm angry at my husband all the time. He's a deadbeat, he's lazy, yada, yada, yada. He doesn't connect with me. What is some key advice that then they can do to start taking that step towards communication and connecting in their partnership?
I think the first step, based on what you had just said, would be the emotional attachment to the scenario. Because when we are in that space of being emotionally attached and angry and upset with something, we're going to be constantly triggered into our human animal space, which means that we don't have the same ability to consciously think through or see the bigger picture. So your viewport might be limited. So first thing I could say in that scenario is that emotionally you need to be able to figure out how do you detach from that. And for a lot of women, we loop. Our brains will loop over and over again. We will replay that same scenario a million times, and then the emotion is like building and building and building as we keep on doing that self-talk. And that's kind of where I'm saying like that emotional piece has to stop. So we need to disconnect the loop, bring ourselves back down into a space of going, okay, hold on a sec. This isn't serving me. Just looping it in my brain and getting more angry is not going to serve me in any form or fashion. But really looking at what triggered me. Was it him that triggered me? Was it something else that triggered me? And how do I get into a place where I'm disconnected from the emotional space and get into what we call human spirit? And that human spirit is a place that we can access our abundant consciousness and our ability to show up with who we truly are, essentially. The second thing, it's interesting that I know you're using a lot of words like, he's lazy and he's not doing this and doing that. And my mentality goes into, well, what narrative are you also creating? So lazy. Okay, well, what does lazy look like? Because men need to transition. So he might look like he's just sitting on the couch doing absolutely nothing, but there's actually a reason for it. And he may be transitioning from doing one thing that maybe he just got home from work and now he needs to go cut the lawn. And sitting on the couch doing AKA nothing and looking lazy is him actually building his energy to go and finish a job, to start a new project. And that's kind of where shifting that narrative and realizing that there's usually a reason there's always a reason for a behavior. It's just how do we get into the space of understanding that? And that's what I facilitate and provide for women, is shifting that outlook of going, sitting on the couch and doing nothing for 20 minutes is actually providing them something. We've just never been taught it. So those are kind of the two key elements, right? We got to disconnect from the emotion, and then we need to start to recognize that there's always a reason for something. It's just that maybe you don't have the tools or the skill set to recognize that reason, unless, of course, you have somebody like me to help facilitate that.
That's fantastic. I know, because women, I find, and through all these studying and learning from you and Allison and just learning all about this topic, is that I've noticed women treat men in their life not like equal partner, but in a male form. We treat men like misbehaving women.
Absolutely. And a hairy version of a woman.
Yes. And so then when they don't respond, act like us, they are bad, they are lazy, they are not doing what they're supposed to do. And we label them and create that narrative when they're never supposed to be like us. They're never supposed to respond and multitask. They're different. And we need to appreciate the difference and allow them to be complementary to us, right?
Absolutely. Their small scenario is even just relating when I have days off with my husband, our morning routines. Because often his morning routine will be he gets out of bed. He's usually out of bed a little bit later than me. He will maybe browse on his phone for a little bit, and then he makes breakfast, and then he'll sit down and watch some TV for a while. And it's all of a sudden like 11 o'clock in the morning. My mornings are like, okay, you wake up at maybe 6 or 7 in the morning. I've probably cleaned the bathroom. I've probably done laundry. I've probably cleaned the kitchen. Like I've already done 5 or 6 different things before 11 a.m. And it's so uncanny to see that difference where, like you said, women as multitaskers, there's a few times in the morning where I'm like, well, why doesn't he just do it like me? Like, why can't he just get up and start doing all these things? Because we both could be so much more productive.
Right.
But that's not the case. He's building his energy. And once he's built his energy and he's done his transitions to get ready for the day, he's unstoppable until 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Versus maybe I stop at like 6 o'clock at night. So it's really just being able to recognize that instead of becoming reactive to those scenarios is just honoring each other's differences.
Oh, I love how you're saying all of this. And in just a little bit before, you talked a little bit about human animal and human spirit. Just explain what that means in regards to relationships.
We are programmed and we are designed for survival. And when you look at how humans have evolved, we've always had the drive and desire to stay alive. And it's honestly sometimes just absolutely amazing to see what we've been capable of. That instinct of human animal will always be a part of our biological drive and desire. And when it comes to relationships, we can get triggered into that space when we feel threatened or when we are actually presented with an opportunity. So threatened, people will go into a space of fight, flight, freeze, which when you think about it, when you think about even like argument or fighting styles between partnerships, maybe somebody can recognize, oh, okay, my husband actually, he's a fighter, but I need to flee. I need to get out of this environment. I need to go take some space and cool down. Or maybe you might be somebody who freezes in the space of feeling threatened. And all of a sudden you can't even think, you can't do anything, you can't even figure out what the English language is all about. And that human animal portion of us is something that's so deeply ingrained in our beings that we've needed it throughout the process of our evolution, essentially. But when you look at a relationship, that can become hard to navigate because what if, say, for example, my partner is a fighter and I need to maybe take some time off and essentially flee the environment? How do you communicate those needs? Or, you know, say, for example, in the face of an opportunity, meaning I'm now being presented with a sale item, that sale item is going to end at midnight. Am I acting or reacting essentially to that sale that's bringing out the worst in who I am? So it's just really intriguing to pay attention to when people are behaving or when we are behaving. Are we in that space of just human animal? Is it our animalistic instincts that are coming forward? And for both sides of the coin, we need it. There's many times in our life that we need it. If I'm walking down a alley at night in a third world country where I shouldn't be and I feel threatened, absolutely. I need to have my senses heightened. I need to have my heart rate going faster. I need to be in that ready state to potentially run. So we need this basic way of being. We just need to actually understand that it's there and how do we use it to our advantage. Versus there's human spirit, and that human spirit is being able to regulate the body, bring us back into a place where the heart rate isn't pumping, the adrenaline isn't surging, our brains are capable of coherent thought, and we're able to speak very clearly about what our experience and what it is that we need. And that is the space that you want to be, because you can see everything that's happening around you, and you're not being triggered back into a fight, flight, or freeze state. Instead, you're going, okay, I can actually reflect on this experience, and I can show up without being emotionally attached to the outcome. And that's a big part. As soon as that emotion part gets triggered, now you're trying to essentially have an outcome be influenced based on the emotion. Versus in human spirit state, we can stay detached from that and then make some logical choices about what the future is going to look like.
Oh, that's amazing. Great advice. And that detaching from the outcome, detaching of what you want to see, and just giving that space and honor, because it is a partnership. And, early on, my husband and I discovered a little technique for us. We call it the cone of silence, because I had been in so many situations where I felt unsafe with men, that I couldn't be truthful, that I couldn't say what I actually was feeling because of what happened. And it led to me always lying and never being honest. So then my relationship couldn't develop and move forward in a great, productive way, because I was never honest. And so we created this cone of silence where my husband said, in this moment, you can be so truthful with me and there's no reaction from me. And vice versa. I had to do that for him. And we detached from what the words were being said and really listened. And it created this safety for us to be truthful. It created a pathway for us to be very honest about our feelings and honor each other's experiences and voices. And it developed intimacy, and it developed trust, and built over time, where now I can just say cone of silence time, and I'm able to be very honest, but eloquently and without attacking. And he's able to do the same, and it's a beautiful, thing and gift for our relationship that we can build upon that. And I encourage other people, do the work. It will pay off. You will see amazing results with your relationship and cohesiveness when you can learn how to detach and communicate. Hey?
Yeah, I love that cone of silence. That's a great one.
Yeah. Oh, we've learned so much from these teachings. And so you are a relationship coach. You teach this. I love all what you have absorbed. You're a master at it. And I just honor all what you're doing to help people actually improve the relationship. What do you offer? How do you teach? What can people learn from you?
Fantastic question. I am in the depths of finally getting my website up and running. And so what that's going to look like is I've developed a whole bunch of written articles that people will have access to being able to read on all the information that I know. Just because I know that we work and live in a very high-paced, fast environment. And so I wanted to give a condensed overview of everything that I know and provide that for everybody. I want everybody to have this information. So the articles will be on there. I do coaching. So coaching would be more one-on-one, clearly. Sometimes it's in person, sometimes it's over the phone, depends on obviously location and what does that person need. The other really interesting thing to pay attention to is trying to address how people learn differently. Sometimes you need to be in that space of another human to actually enjoy and experience some of the emotion that comes out of the conversation. And other times people really do well over just the phone. Or say, for example, the articles, because maybe you just learn better by reading. So I try to address all those different learning styles to make it land for the people who need to obtain the information, or the women that are interested in this information. And then I want to be branching out and do some public speaking as well. I really think that being able to talk to some of the younger generations and explain to them some of my experiences, and especially even working in a male-dominated industry, to discuss what does that look like from being able to understand male behavior, and then as a woman having to walk into that space, what am I bringing to the table, and what is that going to look like for your future, and how do you have to learn and show up and interact with that new environment, essentially. And then at some point, I'll be further going into workshops. It's just that with a new little baby on the way, I don't think workshops are going to be the best option right now, but I would really love to get into workshops and do training with groups and teams of people, and maybe even, for businesses as well, essentially, to be able to have and facilitate that conversation of what does it look like to increase and elevate your communication capabilities with men and women. Because the really interesting thing about everything that I talk about is, yes, I say, okay, understanding men, but a huge part and benefit that comes out of this is there's a lot of women that exhibit and own the same behaviors as men. And that's why you need to be able to reflect on going, both men and women have these experiences, and how do we now just recognize that, honor it, understand it, and then meet them in that space of trying to stay in a partnership.
Oh, that's amazing. I just love you, and I love the work that you're doing, and it is proven, and it provides results, and it improves relationships and adds connection rather than disconnection. You also have a Facebook page, The Hidden Language of Men. You post videos on there. I just want to quickly mention one of the videos about interrupting men, and I know we as women were so good at that. And maybe just explain a little bit about that video and what was the point that you were trying to make there.
Actually, I think I was getting hit by a rash of being interrupted myself and seeing other people getting interrupted. And it was in my work environment. And that's why I was just like, okay, we actually really need to take a step back and understand what happens when you interrupt another person. First off, if you've interrupted them, that means that you did not hear them whatsoever, because you're in a space of going, I'm thinking about what I need, what I want, and what my rebuttal is going to be, and why we need to be listening to me, which means that you've completely discounted that person's experience. And having that happen to me, it shuts me down instantly. If I get interrupted, it's basically a disrespect in the communication. And to me, that I feel disrespected as a human, going, you're not honoring my time, you're not honoring my opinion, you're not honoring what it is that I have as value and bringing to the table. And I find that we, again, when it comes down to the communication learnings that need to happen, I think on a global scale, a huge part that we keep on making mistakes in is interrupting, because we think that through interrupting, the person who is being in that space essentially, that they're going to hear us, but they're not. You've just shut them down. And a lot of times people interrupt because, again, unmet needs. They feel as though they're not being heard. They feel as though they have more to say. They feel as though they have something to provide. But why don't we do that in a more respectful space of ensuring that we can be an active listener and then go, okay, I hear you. And what I hear is, A, B, C. Now, I'd like to be able to bring something else to the table that maybe you haven't seen. And here's my idea. And it's like tennis, where this ball is actually just going back and forth versus somebody just all of a sudden sideswiping and taking the ball away.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Yes. So head to our Facebook page, The Hidden Language of Men. Contact Vanessa. How can people get a hold of you? Email? What can people do to reach out and learn more about helping their relationships?
I think right now, honestly, the best place would be to stay on that Facebook page. And then once I go live with the website, all of that information is going to be broadcasted on there. And then once we get onto the website, you guys will have access to all of me.
Fantastic. Just a recap of what we covered today. So much about learning about men and women in their relationship, creating a partnership, learning the negative patterns of how men and women communicate with one another, which includes emasculation and a lack of communication. How can we crack the code? Well, listen to each other and learn how to meet each other's needs, how we can bridge the gap of disconnect, emotionally detaching from the outcome, and how to respect each other's differences and learn cohesiveness and just have a better relationship going forward in unison rather than pulling apart. Thank you so much, Vanessa, for joining me today. You're just a wealth of knowledge, and I just honor the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Blaise. I really, really appreciate it. I'm just, as you can tell by my voice, I'm just absolutely passionate talking about this information. So I've really enjoyed myself, and this has been a great platform.
Wonderful. If you want to learn more about my coaching programs, purchase my book, or have me speak at your next event, please feel free to visit blaisehunter.com. I also have a free gift for you. Go to my website under the free offer tab, and you'll get the map to finding peace and balance in the day and guiding you when you're feeling overwhelmed and anxious. It guides you right back in a 10-minute video. Thanks again, Vanessa, for joining the show. That's it for this week's episode. Challenge yourself to be vulnerable, lean into the difficulties, and have those open conversations so we can rise up as the heroes of our lives and let us breathe fire together. If you've enjoyed this show, please subscribe and support Blaise the Trail podcast. Reviews are always welcome and appreciated. Thanks for listening. I'm Blaise Hunter.
You've been listening to Blaise the Trail with Blaise Hunter. To learn more about how you can breathe fire and unleash the hero within, or to listen to past episodes, visit blaisehunter.com.